there and welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth. Today we're going to talk about Paracelsus in a fairly brief overview and his contributions to medical science and towards colour therapy. Colour therapy, of course, is different to light therapy and chromotherapy, and there's a separate video that we've got loaded on the channel that refers to the light therapy and colour healing itself, including radiant light therapy. So the therapeutic benefits as a treatment for ailments is not new, despite what people might think. Colour therapy and healing with colour goes back many centuries, millennia in fact, and in this video we're going to take a look at why the medical profession may have ignored the opinions of Paracelsus, despite the fact that he invented the first vaccine, which was actually against the Black Plague, and where he developed the first known pharmaceutical treatment compounds, such as the prescriptions that we have today. So let's take a look at the man first, then his background and his qualifications, and the conclusions that he reached that have now been incorporated into modern medical treatment measures. So in regard to Paracelsus the man, we might think of him today as the first medical chemist, if you like. But having said that, he didn't think of himself as a chemist. He thought of himself as an alchemist, which kind of in some ways is about magic, His writings are rife with astrology and mysticism, and he was the first person to declare that if something is given in small doses, what makes a man ill also cures him. So this was an anticipation of what we call the modern practice of homeopathy. Now, Paracelsus was actually born under the name of, and excuse my pronunciations, Theophrastus von Hohenheim in Switzerland about 1493. He's been described as a Swiss physician, an alchemist, a lay theologist, a philosopher of the German Renaissance, and his father was Wilhelm. His father died in 1534, by the way, was a chemist and a physician who was an illegitimate descendant of a Swabian noble. This is just all a bit of background stuff that you don't really need to know, possibly aren't even interested. But anyway, he was the illegitimate son of George Bombast von Hohenheim, who lived between 1453 and 1499. So we're actually at this point in time going back over 500 years ago. The town of Paracelsus's birth would have been extremely small. When he was born, it's listed as having a population of 38 people in 1467. So you can establish there that he didn't have a lot of connection with the wider world. So Paracelsus's father moved to a place, pronunciation, my apologies again, I think it's called Village in Carinthia, and his father worked as a physician and attended to the medical needs of the pilgrims and the inhabitants of what is referred to as a cloister. Paracelsus originally was educated by his father in botany, medicine, mineralogy, if I can pronounce that as well, mining and natural philosophy. So his early years was basically being educated by his very intelligent father and sought after father. So the relocation of Paracelsus and his father to Carinthia is believed to have occurred in about 1503 after Paracelsus's mother passed away. So his father was a physician and he attended to the medical needs, as stated, of both pilgrims and inhabitants to the area, which was under the control of the Habsburgs at the time, my pronunciation. It was probably an interesting territory. I'm not the full bottle on this, but it sounds as though it had a level of autonomy and it was different from the surrounding areas. So either way, he continued to be educated by his father in botany and medicine, mineralogy, as stated, mining and philosophy, and at some point he's believed to have received what is referred to as a humanistic and theological education from the Catholic clerics that were at St. Paul's Abbey, which is why I've got the image up here. Now, some of the biographers have said that he also received tutoring from 4 bishops, including a bishop or abbot called Johannes Trithemius, if my pronunciation is right, who was the abbot of Ponheim. However, other people argue that it just couldn't be possible because he's not recorded as having visited Carinthia. But everybody agrees that whether or not Paracelsus met him personally, he would have been exposed to the work of the abbot and the different writings and theoretical positions that the abbot had. Anyway, at the age of 16, he started studying medicine at the University of Basel, and he later moved to Vienna. He gained his medical doctorate from the University of Ferrara in 1515 or 1516. Paracelsus ended up becoming quite the outcast, actually. He was a bit of a renegade. He is the one that gave himself the name Paracelsus, which shows a level of arrogance to the man. He is considered, in retrospect, by the way, to be a true genius, and this genius was not fully appreciated until long after his death. And in fact, he is recorded as having very few social skills, and we'll catch a drift to this. He gave himself the name Paracelsus, which actually translates as above Celsus. So what he was saying is that he held himself in very high regard. He knew that he was actually good at whatever it was that he was doing, and he put himself above his peers and colleagues, which of course created a level of, shall we say, differences with them. Now, realistically, to his credit, he had a fabulous thirst for knowledge, and he was given to wandering. Of course, we'll talk about that later. There are reports of him travelling through China and Asia Minor, but they're said to be most likely inaccurate. He definitely was considered to be arrogant and lacking in tact, making comments such as, "The ignorant physicians are the servants of hell sent to torment the sick." This is how he alienated himself from the peers, because he considered them to be ignorant. So he held that the crude language of people such as the innkeepers, the barbers and the teamsters had more real dignity and common sense than what is referred to as the dry scholasticism of Aristotle or Galen of Pergamum and even Avicenna and some of the recognised medical authorities of the day. And in fact, he was run out of Basel after, on June the 24th, 1527, he actually reportedly burned a number of books on a bonfire, including Avicenna, who was considered to be a supreme medical authority, if you like, of the day. So basically he rocked and challenged the system really quite badly at the time, and around about the time that he burned the book, he also had a famous publisher who was a patient of his die, and it was also considered that to burn the books was to be sacrilegious. Now, we are talking about a time when religion, politics and medical treatments were kind of held hand in hand. Anyway, by the spring of 1528, he had fallen into such disrepute with the local doctors and apothecaries and the magistrates that he left Basel and he went up to a place called Colmar, which is about 50 miles north of the university, and he stayed at various places with friends apparently, and he continued to travel for the next 8 years. During this time, of course, he revised some of the old manuscripts and wrote new treatises. What I particularly like is the verse that we see on this page where he's recorded of, you've got to laugh, as upsetting the attitudes of the other students and peers, where he says, "The universities do not teach all things, so a doctor must seek out the old wives, the gypsies, the sorcerers and the wandering tribes, old robbers and such outlaws, and take lessons from them. A doctor must be a traveller, and knowledge is experience." Now, I can't find the quote for it here, but he actually turned around at one point. He's recorded as saying that the worst thing he ever did, or the biggest waste of time he ever did, was actually to do his medical degree. So he really didn't have a lot of respect for those peers and colleagues around him, and this is probably why he was so alienated from them, understandably so. So breakthroughs of Paracelsus that many people won't know is that in 1530 he wrote a clinical description of syphilis, and he maintained that the disease could be successfully treated by carefully measured doses of mercury compounds that were taken internally. Of course, this is no longer the treatment for it, but it was breakthrough at the time. He also stated that Miner's disease, which we now call silicosis, resulted from inhaling the metal vapours. Historically, what was happening at the time is if people, in fact, I think in early Australian times it was referred to as miner's lung. The people at the time believed that if somebody got the miner's lung or the silicosis, it was a punishment or sin, or punishment for sin, that was given to them by the mountain spirits or the elementals. So he said, no, it's not. He was the first one to say, no, it's not. It's about what you breathe in. He's also said to have cured many people in the plague-stricken town of Sturtzing in the summer of 1534. And he was able to do this. This was a breakthrough treatment, and I think probably the start of what we now call vaccinations, and the first person to think of this, okay? Because what he did, and I think also it sounds disgusting, but it is what it is, the way he treated them was by taking a piece of bread. He made a pill from bread, and he contained a minute amount of the patient's excreta, which he had removed by needlepoint, and he put this into the bread and the person took the bread. So that's considered a bit of a vaccination. What other things did he do? He certainly became very wealthy and very sought after by this time. He'd managed to make a bit of a comeback there because of his new approaches to treating illness. He was also the first person, I think it's really interesting to acknowledge this as well, to connect that people developed goiters because of the minerals, especially lead, in drinking water. And he prepared and used new chemical remedies, including, obviously not necessarily preferred ones these days, but mercury, sulfur, iron and copper sulfate. And so he was the first person to unite medicine with chemistry. And this is reflected in one of the first books written in 1618, where it says that Paracelsus contributed substantially to the rise of modern medicine. And it's worthwhile acknowledging this included psychiatric treatments as well. He made contributions there. So potentially his views on mental illness may have been influenced by the Persian physicians of the time, because they'd been studying mental illness and emotional health impacts for a millennia beforehand, as far as I know. So where his peers saw mental illness as being a person being possessed by either evil spirits or dark forces, he was one of the first within his domain to position that mental illness was in fact a treatable malady. And he made the suggestion that mental well-being was steeped in a moral conscience with a direct impact that would influence physical health and well-being. So consequently, he believed that a person's psyche, that is what they think or believe, could either cure or cause physical disease. And that, while I suppose the links with that is that where we're going with this is, he believed that with the sheer force of willpower, a person could either create or maintain health. Now, in his position or his perception, it wasn't just about maintaining psychological health. He believed people could will themselves into physical health as well. So he was also one of the first people to stress the importance of quality sleep, because he believed that it acted as a catalyst and cured mental illness. So he was also a believer in using sedatives, and he made sedatives at the time with sulfur preparations. So this is all very innovative at the time for him. Now, I think it's also worth mentioning here that he's acknowledged by Carl Jung, who wrote about him, that we see in Paracelsus not only a pioneer in the domains of chemical medicine, but also in those of an empirical psychological healing science. So Jung credits him for being the first person to speak within their field of practice about mental health and to offer treatment alternatives. I think it's important that we actually note here that while a lot of Paracelsus's contributions have been upheld within modern science, and we're going to talk about that shortly, not all of them have been tested. So if you decide to go and grab one of his manuscripts and go through it and go, well, I'm going to do what Paracelsus did, I wouldn't advise that, because not all of his theories have stood the test of time, and not all of them have actually been tested, but some have, with some incredible results. So we're going to talk about some of his ideas that have stood the test of time, that are considered to be relevant within modern science. And I guess it would be fair to say that all of these ideas of you are what you eat actually comes back to Paracelsus' original thinking. He held the idea that the shape, colour, appearance and environmental niche, for example, taste, smell, colour of a plant or a medicinal agent, will display the telltale signs or marks that indicate how that agent may be used as a treatment medicine. And he called this telltale mark the signatum, if that's how you pronounce it, but it's easier just to say it's the signature. So, for example, the signature, we'll go through them one by one. The first thing I think that stands out is that he concluded that lemons were good for the liver because lemons are yellow and liver bile is yellow. Now, modern science has obviously developed the evidence there that lemons are perfect for liver detoxification. So we know that the liver also benefits from foods that are high in vitamin B, and these foods include egg yolks, yellow cheeses, bananas, yellow squash and pumpkin. So within this context, he has identified that the colour, certainly for the liver, is relevant. It doesn't apply for all the foods, though, that he's that are evidenced to be healthy for the body in modern times. But when we talk about the shape of foods, he also was of the position that if the food looked like an organ, then it was good for that specific organ. So, for instance, if we go on this, walnuts, cauliflower and broccoli look like a brain. So from his position, they would be eaten for brain health issues. Now, what we know with modern science is that broccoli, cauliflower and walnuts all have health influences that can reduce the symptoms of or the progress of Alzheimer's, and there is some evidence in the modern world to suggest that broccoli can work as a preventative against neurological disease and that they definitely lower stress. Okay, so nothing is a general rule of thumb, but if you look into the properties of each of these particular plants that I'm mentioning, you can see where there is some relevance to Paracelsus's thoughts and how these plants are used in modern science. So I'll go through the rest of them. Other beliefs that he had were that red plants were medicines for the blood. More specifically, if we talk about tomatoes, which he believed to be a heart food because of its colour, it was red, and because of the shape. And if we look at the tomato cut in half in this image, yes, it does look a bit like a heart. So what I find interesting today is that we know, yes, tomatoes are very good to eat to maintain heart health and blood health, but also we now know that they're good for lung and eye health as well. So it's not restricted just to heart and blood. Kidney beans, he positioned, were really good for the kidneys because of their shape. They look like a kidney, and because of their colour, same colour as the kidney. Now, evidentially, kidney beans provide a whole range of amino acids, proteins, fibres. They don't have any saturated fat, and they also have magnesium and potassium in them. And apparently these are evidenced to support and enhance the function of our kidneys and also to reduce the risk of kidney stones. Carrots, his rationale was that they were good for eyesight because they look like eyes. And if you look at the slice of the carrot, they actually do look a bit like an eye. Well, I can see the resemblance. So while eating carrots doesn't help a person to see in the dark, that's a myth. It has been proven that eating carrots do help to maintain overall eye health, if I can speak. What I think is a little funny, and I didn't actually know this until I started doing this video, was that he also believed that figs were really good for testes. I was like, I cannot fathom how that would work. But doing my own research, I've been able to identify that, yes, the studies have shown that figs do increase the mobility of male sperm and increase the sperm count, as well as overcoming male sterility is actually one of the things that I saw. I think there might be a question mark around that. I don't know. Do your own research. I think we've got to keep an open mind. One of the other things that Paracelsus believed was that he was of the opinion that anything that was blue, such as blueberries, cooled fevers and were a treatment for septic infections. Now, evidentially, modern science says berries such as strawberries and blueberries are excellent to eat because they have a chemical or whatever in them called anthocyanin, and they have an anti-inflammatory, antiviral and immune boosting effects. Fascinating stuff. We can see that a lot of the modern breakthroughs that we have in science today in the fields of medicine are simply confirming the hypothesis or beliefs of Paracelsus 500 years ago. Amazing. Now, speaking of food and his beliefs about taste and smell of the food, While I'm not sure that this particular slide refers to Paracelsus' beliefs or that they were of his opinions, this is actually going back to Asian concepts, and I think, if I recall correctly, it's aligned with Vedic thought about flavours and smells. Which is why, if you talk to Asians or you watch any of the Asian cooking programs, they love to incorporate 4 flavours, which is I think sweet, bitter, salty and sour in their meals, which actually is why they taste so wonderful, actually. But these elements for them are also, when I say elements, these flavours are also associated to the elements, if you want to go along that pathway. But I think if we look at this is fascinating in itself because of the quote there that too much joy scatters the spirit and causes anxiety, and the type of joy is not the sort that leads to deep contentment and peace, but rather overexcitement and hyperactivity. So the idea of the flavours of foods was one where it should have a calming influence on the person. But I think it's interesting to look at that flavour one that says pungent on the right hand side. And it's like, well, if it's pungent, what's it trying to do? Shock you back into calmness? I'm not sure. Just an interesting slide to look at. Now, when it comes to modern beliefs around food and what is actually supported, remember, research has always been conducted and it can change, but currently there's a website up with the Harvard University, and there's a blog that refers to the colour healing of foods, and I've put the link on this slide as well, just so that you can actually see more clearly where I've got it from. But yes, just have a read of this. Put the video on pause if you want to read this rather than me go through it. So when it comes to food for chakras, this particular slide is dedicated to beliefs aligned with the Ayurvedic traditions. It's not related to studies by Paracelsus, certainly not as far as I'm aware, and there is nothing to support this evidentially, once again, as far as I'm aware. But I think it's just an interesting slide for those people that want to do the eat for health. It's certainly not going to do any harm for people to eat healthy organic foods or foods that have been well washed or grown well, to actually try and benefit their chakra health through what they eat and having a rainbow coloured plate of food. So this slide is, yes, just for consideration again. From what I understand, and I may be incorrect, and if you know, I welcome and encourage you to put your comments up. Paracelsus didn't actually have any beliefs or associations or even an interest, as far as I know, in healing with colour or radiant light. I think it's important to sort of mention now, just for a little bit of rounded understanding and knowledge of the man, was that by the time he died, he definitely wasn't held in a high opinion by many people, but they would politely refer to him, as I understand, as having the quirks of a genius, but completely lacking in social skills. He was said to be rude and obnoxious and most likely an alcoholic, but to his credit, even when he was under the influence, his mind was still brilliant, apparently, and he was able to dictate manuscripts as far as recording his knowledge. Now, what I think is interesting too is he died in mysterious circumstances at the White Horse Inn. He'd taken up an appointment under Prince or Archbishop, a Duke, I think he was called Ernst of Bavaria, and there were reports that he was either poisoned or pushed from a height. Now, I'm not sure about any of these scenarios. You might have some more information. Just a thought though, while I think about it, if you like the content and the videos and the information I'm putting up, could you please click the like and help me out with the YouTube algorithm? And if you really do like the content and you want to be informed of what's being loaded, I'm going to be putting up a whole range of colour healing videos as part of empowerment, if I can speak, empowering people to access things for their own health and well-being. So when we talk about colours, it's not just about the foods we eat. There's a whole range of things that we can do to improve mood that does have evidence base to it. Even if it doesn't actually have physical evidence to support it, colour certainly impacts on mood and psychology. So yes, if you want to be informed of this, I'm going to have a whole series going up, and that will be looking at the specific properties of each colour, and you can be informed by clicking the Get Notified button. So just a reminder there. So in conclusion, I think we would all be in agreement that Paracelsus was a completely controversial figure, way ahead of his time, extremely progressive, but yes, very controversial. And what he has contributed to the world, not just in medicine, goes beyond. I think it's so mammoth that we actually can't even really describe the magnanimity, if I can say the word. Somebody say it for me, please. I'm fine about that. I've got a sense of humour. The enormousness, shall we say, the largeness of his contributions. He was incredible. And it understandably, to me, is he was so incredibly smart that, yes, he would have absolutely alienated all of his peers around him, because he just was an absolute groundbreaker. I would imagine that potentially nothing has really changed over the years. If people come out and they're controversial with new ideas and new approaches to things, then they're still not always received well, are they? I'm interested, of course, to hear your feedback and thoughts. Anyway, for now, I'm going to say thank you very much for being part of my journey. Love you, leave you, take care, have a wonderful week, day. I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.